Welcome back to SuperWest on Sundays, everybody. My name is Nick Bartlett, and I'm a senior writer here at SuperWest Sports. And it's just going to be me this week making up the show, but welcome to SuperWest on Sundays. So, we had some really big games across multiple levels. Obviously, the big two are going to be Oregon and USC, and we'll start there. But I'll also touch on some Pac 2 and some Mountain West action as well, and just really a lot of West Coast football. So, let's get straight to it. As mentioned at the top here, the first game we got to talk about has got to be the Oregon Ducks result. Just what a win for that fan base, that program, that culture. I'll start with the stats before we get kind of into the feel good aspect of it. But just what a win, what a win, bottom line. So, looking up and pulling up the stats here for Oregon, the first thing you got to take away is what a game from Dylan Gabriel. 23 for 34, 341 yards, two touchdowns. And it really felt like he made all the big throws when they needed to be made. It wasn't just, like a little dink and dunk. He made some big time throws down the field. He also did this without probably his second best weapon at wideout in Trayshawn Holden, who got kicked out of the game for spitting on an Ohio State player. So you're just looking at this is really kind of Dylan Gabriel's moment. I was a little bit unsure of him before this contest, but anytime you knock off the Buckeyes, and you're kind of a key reason why Gabriel deserves a lot of credit. He's for real, and just really, really phenomenal performance from him. Looking at the halfbacks, Jordan James continues to be absolute load to take down. 23 carries, 115 yards, and a touchdown. Evan Stewart, 7 receptions, 149 yards, and a touchdown. And he really stepped up. I think Evan Stewart deserves a lot of credit. I think maybe for the rest of the season, Tez Johnson will continue to be, or maybe Trayshawn Holden, kind of the number one receiver. But for this outing, Evan Stewart, again, 7 receptions, 149 yards, and a touchdown. And someone just has to make plays sometimes, and he was that guy. So really happy for him. And just for the Ducks defense, I would say the main thing is they made the plays when they needed to. Obviously, the Ohio State offense is absolutely phenomenal, basically impossible to stop with all those crazy wideouts and they're loaded at every position. But you're looking at Oregon, they found a way to make the one or two stops that really mattered. When Ohio State was in field goal range at the very end of the game there, obviously the freshman receiver for the Buckeyes made the mistake with the offensive pass interference. But still, this means that Oregon was playing good enough defense that he felt he had to push off to get open. Credit to the Ducks there. And then Jabbar Hamid on a play later, batting the ball down. I'm not sure if it would have stood, but irregardless, batting the ball down and making sure that Ohio State really couldn't attempt a last-second field goal. Obviously, they kind of ran out the clock on themselves there, so turned out a little bit not the best clock management, but bottom line, huge win for the Ducks. And again, just looking at the stats one more time, Evan Stewart leading the way, 149 yards receiving and a touchdown. Jordan James, 115 on the ground and a touchdown. And the big one, Dylan Gabriel, 23 for 34, 341 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. And the main thing for me in this outing is just how big of a win this is for Eugene and the culture. I think a lot of times nationally, people think of the Ducks as maybe like I'm trying to say this like respectfully without, offending anyone, but maybe like a Seattle or like a Los Angeles type team. Eugene is not that. Obviously, they have Phil Knight, Nike, a lot of money, really cool Tracktown USA. They're really well known for track and field, for those who don't know. But just not necessarily maybe a big city team. And it's just a huge win. It feels good. And I think a lot of Ducks fans never would say it, but it felt like they weren't quite getting the credibility they deserved. Obviously, losing the national championship game like 10 years ago. And just, it felt like they just never got the respect they deserved. When you beat Ohio State at home, you hang with them toe to toe for 4 quarters. It honestly probably looked like the slightly better team. That is all eradicated. The losses to Washington are erased. And all of a sudden, you have a team basically bound for the college football playoff, barring a miracle. And that's the last thing, is that the Ducks finally got the game they needed. As I touched on, the 2 losses to Washington, I always go back to the year when they had Justin Herbert and the loss to ASU and a really young Jaden Daniels. But finally, they get the win they needed. Eugene's really happy for them. I hope everyone celebrated. Really cool community, and just happy for them. The fans showed out. They're absolutely loud. They're raucous, and nothing else can be said. Just kudos and enjoy this one because I know that's gotta feel good. And again, barring really an epic collapse, which doesn't feel likely, you're looking at a team who's bound for the college football playoff. And I guess one final note is this team, I think they can win the college football playoff. I'm not saying they will, but with a result like this, they certainly have the talent. And I think just the tight end combination of Terrence Ferguson and why am I blanking on the name? Oh, Herbert. Those two are just absolutely phenomenal together. And it's not so much their receiving, it's their blocking. And you combine this with an already complete unit, talent everywhere else, and it may just be the X factor. So these two tight ends obviously help out in the receiving game. Ferguson had some nice catches in this one. Felt like a little bit more than his statistics may indicate. But those duo of blockers really, it just adds an extra element to Oregon that a lot of other teams probably don't have, and probably it's a little bit unusual to prepare for. So good stuff from the Ducks. The next game we're going to be hopping into here was USC Penn State. There's no real way to say it other than this was an absolute heartbreaker for USC. But the kind of things I wanted to touch on is the way the Trojans played. It was just a lot differently than what we probably would have expected. Woody Marks had 20 carries, 111 yards on the ground, and really was the Trojans' best player. I think oftentimes when we think of a USC team, we think of a pass-first offense. I know that's what I expected going into this contest, and it was pretty much the opposite. Miller Moss, only 20 for 34, 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Already touched on Marks, 111 yards. He also added 44 through the air. But Quinton Joyner also had a really nice long run and had 3 carries for 82 yards and a touchdown, finishing off a nice long touchdown run, kind of sidestepped in the end zone early in the game. And I think a lot of people thinking with the Trojans, again, you're thinking maybe a Kyron Hudson, a Deuce Robinson, a Zachariah Branch, and none of them really stepped up. And I know there were some questions about the Trojans kind of having that number one receiver entering this contest, and that's not the reason they lost. Miller Moss missed a key throw. I guess I should just be honest here before we go to the receiver breakdown. Miller Moss missed a key throw at the end of the fourth quarter that really would have put the Trojans in field goal range. Pretty easy slant. He overthrew it, and it went for an interception. And that's just a throw he's got to make. I know he's done well this year, but that is a throw he's got to make. You can't put it all on the quarterback, but you make that one throw, your team could have had a different result. And unfortunately, it's pretty much that simple. Popping back to the question of who's going to be the number one receiver going forward, we heard earlier in the year maybe Zachariah Branch. He had 2 catches for 6 yards. We saw Jacoby Lane with a phenomenal outing against Wisconsin, 2 receptions, 8 yards. Kyron Hudson, again, 4 catches, 36 yards and touchdown. But really just no one is emerging as that number one guy. And I'm curious to see how that kind of affects the team going forward. Maybe Woody Marks just does become the star with his breakout game this week. But the Trojans team that is now 3 losses, probably lacking a little bit of confidence and certainly eliminated from the college football playoff. It should be interesting to see if they have a receiver, if it's Miller Moss, or whether Woody Marks remains the star, because someone's got to kind of keep their head in the shoulders here. You don't want the season to turn sideways, and it can very, very quickly, particularly with the Big Ten schedule, particularly after you just blew a loss at home. That hurts a lot in the Big Ten. This is a little bit different than the depth of this conference is a little bit different than the Pac-12 was in previous seasons. So heartbreak of a loss for the Trojans. You do want to, again, shout out Woody Marks playing just absolutely phenomenal. The Trojans rushing attack looking absolutely great, but no one wants to hear that right now. They lost one they should have got, and it hurts. It hurts. Moving forward here, so those were obviously the big 2 games, the big 2 essentially. And the next games I want to talk about, because obviously we're here at SuperWest Sports, And this is a game that I think got entirely overlooked because obviously there are some there's some bigger results out there. But another game that I wanted to talk about that I think not a lot of sports shows might talk about was Oregon State versus Nevada. Nevada found a way to knock off the 4-1 Beavs, and that is just a huge monumental win for the Wolfpack. It essentially saves their season. They're looking at a 3-4 record now. They're a lot better, and essentially the gist of this game was, and you're going to like this name, all you ex-Colorado Buffalo Buffs fans out there. Brendan Lewis is quarterback for the Wolfpack, and he ran for 9 carries, 151 yards, and 1 touchdown. Savion Red, their halfback, added 23 yards had 23 carries for 137 yards and 4 touchdowns. And essentially what Nevada did was they Oregon State. They beat him with the rush game, and they out-physicaled him out front. And I don't think anyone was necessarily expecting that. Beavers fans would probably kill me if I don't add in the fact that Giovanni McCoy did have 4 interceptions. He threw for 348 yards, but 4 interceptions in any road game isn't going to get it done. Plain and simple, just not good enough. So you're going to want to see how McCoy bounces back there. But bottom line, just what a win for Nevada. Again, this gives them a real shot at bowl eligibility, sitting at 3-4 now. Again, I don't think many people saw this coming. And I was a huge Brendan Lewis hater for a long, long time. I made fun of him consistently in Colorado. And I just want to say kudos for proving me wrong. Kudos for sticking out in college football and getting a really nice win here. Really lifts your program. And I know it's a tough loss for the Beavs, but for the Wolfpack, it's huge. And those on West teams. So it's really commonplace in today's NCAA. We're talking about Washington State and Oregon State being overlooked. But what about these Mountain West teams that aren't even being considered for the new Pac-12, the new Pac-2, whatever it may be? I think Nevada is one of those teams, and sure as heck, they went and showed that they belong. They knocked off the Beavers, and again, just one final kudos. But again, this is one of those results that probably overlooked nationally, but it's important to Nevada, and it's important to some teams in the Mountain West who may be feeling overlooked right now. Continuing on with the Mountain West Pac-12 theme, we had my alma mater, the Washington State Cougars, playing the Fresno State Bulldogs. This game, I don't really know what to say about this game. I'll pull up the stats, just kind of, I guess, hinder my emotions. But you're looking at Fresno State. It felt like to me they pretty much dominated the second half. I felt like they deserved to win. They felt like the better team. Elijah Gilliam, he's their backup running back. 20 carries for under 20 yards and a touchdown. He was filling in for Malik Sherrod. And pretty much he controlled the game, and the Bulldogs' offensive line controlled the game in the second half, outplaying WSU. Mikey Keene threw one really unfortunate pick six, if you're a Bulldogs fan, to the Cougs. And I believe his name was this is my alma mater. You think out of all the names, it's Ethan O'Connor made the really nice pick six. And again, it was essentially a backbreaker for the Bulldogs. The Cougs defense had been playing solid enough, but that one moment really it changed everything. WSU went down and added another field goal to go up 8. Fresno State got the ball back, but essentially couldn't score to end the game. So the Cougs are now sitting at 5-1. I think people think of them, as a John Mateer-led team just because of the early season stuff. But now you're looking at a squad that could potentially have a good defense and made it through the thick of their schedule. If you're looking at Mateer's stats, again, I was telling you, Fresno State outplayed the Cougars, and that needs to be fully noted. Mateer, 17 for 35 throwing, 172 yards, and interception. He also lost a fumble. Wayshawn Parker, a halfback for the Cougs, 12 carries, 63 yards. Mateer, 18 carries, 46 yards, which only equates to 2.6 yards per carry. So again, Fresno State showing off their fight, but just Mikey Keene made that one throw, and it was just too much to overcome in the fourth quarter. One thing I want to add, keep in mind, this is coming from a Cougar. I love Fresno State's culture. I think the only way I can describe it is the music they played in their stadium yesterday was everything from Chattahoochee to E40. And if you know music, that is like country to rap. And I just love Fresno. They show out in the Valley, and I felt a little bit bad for that program losing that game in that way. That's still a very good team, and I'm really interested to see how they look when Malik Sherrod comes back. Mikey Keene's been a little bit beat up in the last couple outings, so I'd expect them to be back. Braylon Sharp had a good game for the Bulldogs. Mac Delaney is always a solid receiver, so interested to see how the Bulldogs bounce back again with losses to Boise, Michigan, and Washington State. To Michigan, UNLV, and Washington State. Nothing to be ashamed of there, but I know Fresno State expects better. And again, I think this is one of those programs that should just deserve more respect nationally. For the Cougars, didn't play well, but found a way to win a road game. That's never easy. Again, as I just mentioned in the Valley, they do care about their squad. But for the Cougs now, they're sitting at 5-1. They survived the hard part of their stretch with UW, Texas Tech, and 2 road games against Boise State and Fresno State. Throwing a miracle win against San Jose State in between time. And this team is realistically looking at a 10-win season, barring some sort of epic collapse. They should be favored in every contest going forward. I think they've pretty much faced all the top tier teams in the Mountain West, so it should be interesting to see if they choke one or not. Because again, anything's possible. We just talked about what Nevada did to Oregon State. So to me, those are the biggest games I'd say in the Mountain West. Pac-12 this week. I'll touch on a couple more notes later, but just wanted to again say Fresno State, tough loss. Keep your head up for the Cougs. You found a way. You found a way. That's all I can say about my alma mater, but obviously I'm happy they won. Kind of the other 3 games, and I won't go as in depth. So again, we talked about the Big 2, the Mountain West Pac-2 combo. The other 3 I want to talk about was ASU versus Utah, Colorado, Kansas State, and UW versus Iowa. I think I won't spend too much time on each of those games, but kind of, just a couple quick thoughts. So for ASU Utah, what a win for the ASU. They've completely transformed their program. They're picked last in the Big 12 this season, and Kenny Dillingham has made this program legit, and he did it in about 2 months, something like that. So really, really quick. You're looking at Sam Levitt at quarterback. He's really solid. He's a good player. The stat line may not indicate how effective he really is, but 11 for 18, 154 yards and a touchdown. Also the interception against Utah. But he was able to extend plays and just make things happen. His favorite weapon is Jordan Tyson. 5 receptions, 84 yards and a touchdown. Should say his favorite weapon in this contest. Those two seem to have a really nice thing going. But the key and the star of this game was Cameron Skattebo, who is the Sun Devils halfback, 22 carries, 158 yards, and 2 touchdowns, including 2 long back-breaking runs against the Utes. This is Utah's defense. I know that, and we'll touch on their quarterback situation here in a second. I know that they were not at 100% offensively. This is still the Utes defense, and Skattebo ran all over them. Skattebo could realistically be a very outside contender for the Heisman-type player. Obviously not going to make that final stage, the Final Four, but he's legit. He is hard to tackle, and he deserves a lot of respect. And just what a win for the Sun Devils. Again, you're looking at a team that was just entirely overlooked and left for dead. And I know Dillingham likes to build or would like to build his program the way that Kyle Whittingham has for the Utes. And so just knocking that squad off in whatever circumstances is huge. For Utah, plain and simple, it's the quarterback situation. Are they going to roll with Isaac Wilson going forward, who is a freshman who has made some pretty big mistakes this year? Or he's got a lot of talent, though. Or are you going to roll with Cameron Rising? And he was starting his first game back for the Utes, if you didn't get to see this. Don't look at his stats. They're awful. He was injured. He was super injured. He was super hurt. Obviously, there's a little bit of rust to go with that, but he was hurt. It was obvious. He couldn't move. He didn't want to get tackled. He underthrew about every throw. Any pass that he didn't underthrow, he massively overcorrected and overthrew. And it was just tough to watch a 2-time Pac-12 champion and bona fide superstar, as far as I'm concerned, struggle like that. I hope that he's able to get the rest he deserves or just shake off the rust. I got a lot of respect for Kyle Whittingham, so I trust him I just trust Kyle Whittingham and how he'll handle that situation. But it was notable that he stuck with Rising throughout this contest when everyone could tell he was damn near 40%. We're talking about 100%. He would have been lucky to be 30%, man. It was that rough. For ASU, again, just everything's in front of them. Maybe a chance to win the Big 12 now. Who would have saw that coming? And for those of you who didn't get to see it, the the Kenny Dillingham interview after the game was absolutely phenomenal. So if you remember one or two things about this game, remember Scadaboo basically carved up Utah's defense, and Kenny Dillingham's post-game interview, because he was absolutely hyped. They asked him about his team's like, we're some dogs. We got some fight. And I had forgotten he was an ASU alum. So it was like half him celebrating him and his team and half him just celebrating the university. He actually, during the interview, started jumping around with the fans. He told the reporter that he was one of them. He's like, I was one of them, and just started jumping around with the fans. And it's ASU has its own culture. My cousin went there, and it's a little wild, but it was just beautiful to see. It was fun to see, and ASU, just kudos. And Kenny Dillingham, you got the right guy. You got a guy who knows what ASU is all about. Another big market team that's often overlooked, just right outside Phoenix and Tempe, and a huge win for the Sun Devils. And just go watch that Kenny Dillingham interview, guys. It was funny, it was entertaining, and it was just good stuff. It's going to make your heart feel good. There's no other way to say it. So, like I mentioned, I'll only cover two other games. I don't want to kind of spend too much time here. We don't want to keep the show going longer than it needs to. But before we hop in and kind of round out the show with the final two games, I just want to give you a quick recap of what we've covered so far. Again, the big two this week, no matter how you slice it out west, was Oregon, Ohio State. Ohio State got into field goal range at the end of the game, had an offensive pass interference. The Ducks made a couple stops, and the Buckeyes had terrible clock management and eventually lost that game. Dylan Gabriel really stepped up and showed that he is the guy. He's a leader and a potential college football championship winning quarterback. Evan Stewart stepped up at wideout, and Jordan James did his thing as usual. The other games, USC Penn State. USC lost one they really should have had. Tough missed throw. Tough missed throw by Miller Moss at the end of the fourth quarter that led to interception and kept Penn State alive. The USC kicker missed his field goal in overtime, and Penn State made his. The Trojans were led by Woody Marks in a really good rushing attack, which caught people off guard, probably expecting more of a passing-oriented team, but the rushing attack looked good. But bottom line for the Trojans, they let one slide at home. They're sitting at 3-3 and probably eliminated from the college football playoff. So in the Mountain West Pac-12, Nevada with a nice upset over Oregon State. Feel good story for ex-Colorado Buffaloes quarterback Brendan Lewis. Rushed for over 100 yards on the day and got the win. The key for Oregon State was 4 interceptions by quarterback Giovanni McCoy, and a really tough loss for the Beavers, who were looking for a big bowl, or probably not realistic, but this certainly eliminates any hope they had for a college football playoff berth. But probably hurts their chance for a big bowl. Interested to see how McCoy bounces back with 4 interceptions. But for the Wolfpack, they're sitting at 3-4, and just a huge win for them. Huge win for them. And this is a result that probably won't get looked at nationally. So I was a huge Brendan Lewis hater for a long time when he was the Buffs, and I wanted to give him some shout outs, some love, some kudos for getting it done and proving me wrong, at least on this day. The other game in the Mountain West Pac-12, my alma mater, Washington State, knocked off Fresno State on the road. Essentially, Fresno State controlled the game with their ground attack, their backup rushing back, Gilliam, and they should have won the game. But Mikey Keene, the Bulldogs quarterback, threw a tough pick 6 to Cougars. Cornerback Ethan O'Connor took it to the house, and the Cougs are now sitting at 5-1, and realistically should finish 10-1 or 11-1, however many games they got left, and should be primed for a pretty big bowl. The last two games I wanted to touch on here, again, I'll just kind of give you my quick thoughts, is going to be Colorado, Kansas State, and UW versus Iowa. You're looking at Colorado, and they don't really have an identity outside of Shadur and Travis Hunter. Seems like they just kind of throw the ball a lot. Obviously, they had some other receivers step up in this game. I believe it was, let me just pull up the stats. It's probably the easiest way to do this here. Omarion Miller stepped up, 8 receptions, 145 yards. Will Shepard also had 5 receptions for 83 yards. And LeJonte Wester, 58 yards, 2 touchdowns. But again, you're just looking at a team here that just doesn't seem to have an identity outside throwing the ball. And Shadur Sanders seems to be holding on to the ball too long, taking some unnecessary sacks. I know this is a product of an offensive line that's left him for dead, for lack of better terms, for like 2 years here now. But Dion was talking all this stuff, and that's part of it. When you talk all this crap, when you say get me in year one, this is the only chance you're going to get me, or something along those lines. When you complain about all the Big 12 coaches poll kind of rating you low, well, guess what? When you lose these games, people don't feel bad. Have you made massive strides at Colorado? Yes, huge strides from the previous regime. We were just talking about Brendan Lewis and how he struggled a little bit, or a lot of it at Colorado, for just being real here. But when you talk like this, you need to be better. And granted, Kansas State made a really nice pass to win the game. They're not known for throwing the ball, but did make one huge pass to kind of seal the game and put it out of reach. But this feels just because the Buffs really they probably should have lost to Baylor if it wasn't for Hail Mary. So losing one of these two games is kind of expected. To pull up some quick stats before we move on here, because again, I said I wasn't going to spend too much time on this. Shedeur Sanders, 34 for 40 throwing the ball, 388 yards, 3 touchdowns. But that all looks good and dandy. 1 interception as well. But then you look at the rushing stats. First off, looking at Shedeur himself, 9 carries, negative 50 yards. I think that speaks to the lack of any escaping the pocket and getting sacked way too many times. For rushing, for halfback, you got Dallas Hayden, 7 carries for 11 yards, and Isaiah Augustave, 3 carries, 10 yards, and a touchdown. And that's just not going to do it. That's just absolutely abysmal on the ground. You're looking at a defense that still doesn't really have an identity. They're doing their best. They stepped up a little bit, put a little bit of pressure on Avery Johnson, but DJ Giddens still ran for 25 carries, 182 yards, and that's his average of 7.3. Chase Brown, 6 receptions, 121 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And again, Avery Johnson, who's not known for his throwing, 15 for 23, 224 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. And it just, again, for Colorado, we just need a little bit better. If you're going to talk all that smack, for lack of better terms, we just need a little bit better. So don't want to spend too much time on this. Obviously, hope Travis Hunter's okay. I know another key wideout got banged up as well. Name slipped in my head, but the Buffs are sitting at 4-2, which feels just about right. Still got a small chance here in the Big 12, but again, I think Dion expected better. And with the heights he set for the program, he's just not meeting them just yet. Not to say that they haven't improved, that they haven't gotten better, and that he's not a good coach. But for all the talk and everything he laid out, we just expect a little bit better. And again, I want to see personally a tiny bit better from Shedeur Sanders. I thought the sacks he took in this game, all of them weren't necessary. Again, a lot of that's a product of a really bad offensive line for a long time, but I felt he could have done a little bit better. And speaking of quarterbacks who could have done a little bit better, I didn't make too many friends here on UW Twitter this week. And I'm not really sure why, because I actually think that UW's a really good team. I just don't think that Will Rogers is the guy. Iowa absolutely, they beat them 40-10. And if you're looking at UW's roster, and so this is what I was trying to explain to people on UW Twitter, I understand there's all these moving parts, and essentially everyone's new, and you lost to Dunze and a bunch of pieces on the offensive line, if not the whole offensive line, both the Jalens at receiver, and really it was in McMillan and Polk, and it's a lot. But you also brought in Will Rogers. You also brought in Jonah Coleman. You got Denzel Boston at wideout. You got a decent offensive line. You got Azzopardi coming in from San Diego State. You got Giles Jackson, who's a proven deep threat. And so there's enough pieces there. You got Latu at tight end that this team should be good and should be competing with Iowa. And so it's like, if I'm going to consider UW a Rutgers caliber program, I don't. I still view them. Obviously, they're not in the top tier like Oregon or Oregon State or Oregon or Ohio State this year, but I still view them as a pretty elite program. And for a pretty elite program, you're looking at a team that, with this loss, could finish with a losing record this year. They travel to Indiana next. They still have USC, Penn State, and Oregon on their schedule. And that's a problem. That's a problem. So I just expect better from Will Rogers. It's not that he doesn't make throws. It's not that he can't. It's not that he's not even a decent leader. It's the fact that he makes all the wrong plays when they don't need to happen. He'll take a strip sack when it doesn't need to happen. And plain and simple, not all of this falls on the quarterback, but a team like UW, irregardless of all the transition, unless we're going back to the Tyrone Willingham era, does not lose to UW and Rutgers in the same season and doesn't lose to Iowa by 30. Iowa's not known to put up 40 points on very many people. I understand a lot of this came when the game was out of reach, but I just personally want to see better from Will Rogers. I personally respect UW's football program, so if I rubbed anyone on Twitter, well, here's my retort. Again, I personally respect UW's program, and I'm going to continue to grade them as a top-tier program. They're a top-tier program. So with that, I need a little bit better from the quarterback. I hope for Will Rogers' sake he bounces back. Obviously, the West Coast is always better when Seattle's good at football, when Tempe's good at football, when the LA schools are good at football. The big market teams bring money, they bring eyes, they bring notoriety, they bring fame. So obviously pulling for them, but just want to see better from Will Rogers. Kudos to Iowa, though. So kind of closing out the show here, I think that pretty much does it. Just some final quick notes. A really tough loss for Cal. Yeah, just tough loss at Pitt. Now, where are they after blowing the game to Miami and losing to Florida State? All of a sudden, Cal doesn't look as good as they are, and that's a good team. That is a good team that's finding ways to lose games, and that's literally the worst situation to be in. The other kind of final notes I want to throw out here in the Mountain West was a nice win for San Diego State, knocking off Hawaii by 3 points. Big win for the Aztecs, and I believe they've gotten 2 in a row, one over Central Michigan and one over Hawaii now. So they're slowly starting to find their rhythm under Sean Lewis and quietly put together 2 victories here in a row. Colorado State also with a huge victory over San Jose State. They're looking better now that Torrey Horton is back. Fowler Nicolosi, let's just say they're looking better now that Torrey Horton's back. But the Rams protect their turf and get themselves really save their season. If they lost to San Jose State, they would have been in a tough place. And on a national landscape, nice escape for Alabama. Tough onside kick situation against South Carolina, but Bama and ex-UW coach Kalen DeBoer find a way to get that defensive stop after the onside kick and still get a victory. So before I head out of here, I just want to we already touched on the Big Two recap. We already touched on the Mountain West. Again, out of my other 3, my quick thoughts, ASU, big win, Scatterboo, Sam Levitt, Jordan Tyson combination, for real. I will never do that again, I promise. Essentially, you're looking at, and then go watch the Kenny Dillingham interview. That was really cool to see, just him hyped for his alma mater and jumping around the fans. That just felt good for me to watch. Colorado, Kansas State. Colorado doesn't really have a clear identity outside of Shadur and Travis Hunter and their passing attack. No consistency really anywhere else. And 4-2 feels accurate, but a tough loss still at home against Kansas State, particularly after the nice comeback. But they're still in a decent position. By Deion Sanders standards, they might not be where they expected to be. But again, since he took over Colorado originally, they've improved, and the results speak for themselves again. The Brendan Lewis-led Colorado team struggled to even put a point on the board. And lastly, I want to see more out of Will Rogers at UW. I think UW has a pretty complete roster. I'm understanding that they do have, a bunch of moving pieces, but I still want to see Will Rogers do better. So with that, guys, this has been SuperWest on Sundays. We have some really fun action next week. Not sure what the games are. I will, look at that once I finish up the show and get us out of here. Thank you for tuning in. As always, like and subscribe on YouTube because you're looking at the Rollius about that time. So you should now like and subscribe. How you like that, baby? That is probably the best rap I will ever have in my life. But thank you guys again. I am Nick Bartlett. I'm a senior writer here at SuperWest Sports, and this has been SuperWest on Sundays.